This is the H96 Pro Plus, an Android TV box with the S912 chipset inside. But is it worth it and what can it do? Stick around to find out. It's TechWiz time. Hey guys, hope you're having an awesome week. My name's Jonathan and this is TechWiz Time, the channel that creates technology tutorial and review videos. And in this video I'm going to be looking at the H96 Pro Plus TV box. I've done a few TV boxes in the past and this one is a little bit more powerful and it's under $70 as well, so let's have a look at it. But first, I want to thank Banggood for sending this out to me. No money is exchanged hands and thoughts and opinions are my own. So with that said, let's do a little rewind and unbox this thing. So firstly, the box looks really nice and original. It's got a little gold foil seal on there. Let's open it up. And we'll just pull the TV box to the side and have a look what's inside. So we've got a remote control. Fairly generic looking, but it looks like it's got mouse controls on there as well, and also controls for a TV. Not too bad. Next up, we've got the standard 2-pin power supply. That'll be the 5V 2A variety, a HDMI cable, and a little user manual. And on to the main event, the box itself. And there it is. Peel that back just there. Fingerprint magnet. So before we get to specs, let's have a look at the ports. So it looks like we've got a reset hole there, as well as 2 USB ports. I would hazard a guess that they're USB 2. Over on the other side, we've got a micro SD card slot. And on the rear, we've got an Ethernet port, SP diff, HDMI, AV, and 5V power. Now, like I mentioned at the start, this has the S912 chipset inside, which is an 8-core CPU running at 2 GHz. In terms of GPU, it's got the Mali-820, and this particular model has 3 GB of RAM and 32 GB of storage. The RAM is DDR3. This also comes with Bluetooth 4.1, as well as Wi-Fi up to AC at 5 GHz. The Ethernet port is a Gigabit port, which is fantastic, and it's running Android 7.1.2. And for those interested, the box is actually rooted as well, which is great. So with the specs and the ports out of the way, let's have a look at some benchmarks. First up, we've got A1 SD Bench, and this is to test the internal read and write speeds as well as the micro SD card speed. So with the internal, we're looking at a read speed of 48 megabytes per second and a write speed of 51 megabytes per second. Switching over to the micro SD card, unfortunately we get some pretty low speeds here, and I would say that it's using an older USB 2 chipset. The read speed comes in at 17 megabytes per second, whereas the write speed comes in at 15 megabytes per second. And due to this having DDR3 RAM inside it as well, the RAM speed comes in at 3,768 megabytes per second. Next up, we'll use the speed test app to see how fast the Wi-Fi and the inbuilt LAN speeds are. So when it comes to Wi-Fi, the 5 GHz just doesn't cut it, unfortunately. It comes down at 37 megabits per second, and the upload speed is 16 megabits per second. Now this is right next to my router, which is 5 GHz, and previous devices such as phones get a lot higher than this, so it's definitely not the positioning of the device or anything like that. Next up, we check out the Gigabit Ethernet, and we're getting download speeds of 163 megabits per second and upload speeds of 65 megabits per second. So not too bad. The next test we look at is N22. Now this tests several things in regards to CPU, GPU, the RAM, and also the user interface. So here we get an overall score of 38,869 with a 3D score of 8,559, a UX score of 13,230, a CPU score of 13,051, and finally a RAM score of 4,029. Next up, we try our luck with Geekbench, and we get a single core score of 467 and a multi-core score of 2,258. Next up in the test, we've got the 3D Mark software, and this tests out the capabilities of the GPU inside. So first up is Slingshot, and that score we get 561, and unfortunately the GPU isn't compatible with Slingshot Extreme, so we can't get a score there. But we get an Ice Storm score of 7,605 and an Ice Storm Extreme score of 4,975. So that's enough with the benchmarks. Let's have a look at some streaming. So when it comes to streaming, Netflix works straight out of the box. And streaming a 4K video with YouTube, you can see here that we're getting a resolution of 1080p, so it won't allow us to stream at the full 4K through the YouTube app. All right, next up, let's test out some Kodi with some 4K files, and the first one up is the Big Buck Bunny test. Now I tried both 30 frame per second and 60 frame per second versions of this 4K file, and unfortunately only the 30 frame per second file ran at this stage. And from what I can see, it's getting the full 30 frames per second, so 60 FPS files are probably out of the range of this product. Next up, I do the Jellyfish test, where I test out different bit rates of 4K files. Now the first one is a 55 megabit per second file, and this one did stream at the 30 frames per second. However, the other bit rates of 140, 200 and 400 megabits per second didn't even load. So unfortunately this box isn't capable of high bitrate files. Okay, that's enough with streaming and media and so forth. Let's have a look at gaming on this device. Because if you're anything like me, you love emulation. Normal Android games work fine on this, but emulation is where you can really push the device to see how well it can run. So first off the bat, let's look at some Psp emulation with the emulator Pp. Now first game off the ranks is Power Stone. And unfortunately, this one was actually only getting about 30 to 40 frames per second, which was a little bit disappointing. It's not bad, and with some tweaking, you can actually get this a little bit higher. So if you'd like a video on how to get more out of Pp with an Android TV box, then let me know down in the comments below. So after Power Stone, we can have a look at God of War. And this is a test for any system. Unfortunately, unless you've got a really big GPU, there's just too much going on in it to be able to run at any decent frame rate. So we can see here it's running at 10 to 20 frames per second, which is like playing a game in slow motion. So unfortunately, you're not gonna be able to play God of War on this box. All right, so that's Psp emulation out of the way. Let's have a look at some Dreamcast emulation with the Dreamcast emulator Raycast. So with this box, any Dreamcast game that I threw at it pretty much ran straight out of the bag. So you can see here Sonic Adventure 2 running at the full 60 frames per second, or from what I can judge. Next up, we've got the fan favorite Shenmue, which was running at the 30 frames per second, so definitely playable. And lastly was the fighting game Soul Calibur. Again, the graphical glitches here are normal, so don't judge it for that, but it was getting the full 60 frames per second. So Dreamcast emulation is a big plus. All right, and lastly, I tested out some PlayStation emulation with the emulator Psp. And again, this little TV box creamed it. We've got Final Fantasy VII here running at the full 60 frames per second. I almost didn't want to stop playing. It just brought back so many memories. Next up was Metal Gear Solid. And again, this one was at a sneaky 60 frames per second, so not too bad. And lastly, the one that causes some boxes some trouble is Tekken 3. And this one was achieving that 60 frames per second. So nice job. So with everything out of the way, what did I actually think of this box? Well, in terms of most things, it didn't do too bad. The most disappointing things about this is the Wi-Fi and the micro SD card. Because neither of those can achieve those good speeds, it sort of lets down the box just a little bit. If that's not too much of a concern, then this is a great box otherwise. So as always, links are down in the description below. I'll also try and find a coupon code if I can. But overall, as a cheap alternative to an Nvidia Shield, which, come on, is the king of Android TV boxes, this is not a bad choice. And probably a little bit better than the other rock chip ones that I've reviewed in the past. So is there anything you'd like to see tested on this H96 Pro Plus TV box? Then leave me a comment down below and let me know. If there's anything you'd like me to test out in future tech gadgets, any sort of tests or anything like that, then also leave me a comment down below because I do listen to my comments, even if I can't reply to them all. In the past, I've actually changed up my videos because of comments that viewers have made. So I just want to say thanks to everyone that actually contributes to this channel. It's really helping it to grow. And speaking of grow, if you know anyone that's looking to buy one of these H96 Pro Plus boxes, or is in the market for one, then share this video with them to let them know what this box can actually do. And also throw it a like too. And lastly, if you're not a subscriber, then make sure you do and hit that bell icon too, so that way you get notified of my new videos. And as always, imagine, learn, create.